Black dust and soot, the secret for weather warfare, geoengineering, and ozone destruction. It is crucial for artificial cirrus cloud creation, weather warfare, geoengineering, and ozone destruction. Carbon black dust and soot is released in the exhaust of jet aircraft by burning fuels as soot, or dumped or pumped from military aircraft as carbon black. Carbon black and soot are often used interchangeably. However, carbon black is manufactured and soot is the unwanted byproduct of combustion. Carbon black has military and scientific uses such as increasing cirrus cloud cover, increase or decrease precipitation, dissipate fog, and hurricane modification. Soot comes from commercial aviation and has weather modification and geoengineering effects such as increased cirrus cloud cover, alters rainfall patterns, affects solar radiation by cooling by day and trapping heat by night, contains metals coated in sulfur dioxide and sulfuric acid or acid rain. Soot is filled with metals such as chromium, iron, molybdenum, sodium, calcium, aluminum, vanadium, barium, cobalt, copper, nickel, lead, magnesium, manganese, silicon, titanium, and zirconium. Considering that some fraction of soot can effectively act as an ice nucleating particle, and that a dominant fraction of ice residuals in cirrus clouds contain metal compounds, the presented findings support the assumption that aircraft engine emissions can act as ice nucleating particles, or cloud condensation nuclei, or just generically called a cloud seed. This leads to ozone destruction. Though airborne, black carbon is known to dissipate and settle down in a few months under the influence of rain and wind and is unlikely to travel upwards of 4 kilometers. However, a group of scientists from India say they now have evidence of such particles existing up to 18 kilometers in the stratosphere, and that there are about 10,000 of them per every cubic centimeter. Given the shape and location of these black carbon particles, they argue it could only derive from emissions of aviation fuel, and they pose a problem because these black carbon particles can linger long enough to provide a fertile ground for other chemical reactions that can deplete the ozone layer. Interestingly enough, David Keith, famous geoengineer, talked about this photophoretic levitation of engineered aerosols for geoengineering. And he talked about how engineered nanoparticles could exploit the photophoretic forces, enabling more control over particle distribution and lifetime than is possible with sulfates, perhaps allowing climate engineering to be accomplished with fewer side effects. And he was specifically talking about levitating aluminum, titanium, and barium up into the stratosphere with magnetic forces and or photophoretic forces, which are caused by the sun heating them. So what happens if we lose our ozone layer? It would kill all plant life on the planet, cause non-melanoma skin cancer and malignant melanoma development, and cataracts in humans. Kill all marine life, including phytoplankton and developmental stages of fish, shrimp, crab, amphibians, leading to a breakdown of the whole marine food chain. And UVB radiation could affect all the other greenhouse gases on the planet. So in 1958, jet trails dim sun Palm Springs gripes. And basically they were saying the contrails are not disappearing but breaking down into a haze and creating a cloud-like appearance in the sky. So they went to the Air Force with this, and the Air Force basically told them to screw off. Air Force gives Village two choices: live with the trails or move. 1959. Let's face it, men, said a crisp-talking, star-studded general, you'll either have to live with the vapor trails or move the city of Palm Springs. The resort area it happens is known as the Palm Springs intersection, the freeway interchange of all West Coast aerial traffic. So the city officials and civic leaders, in an apparent unanimous, unspoken agreement, decided that a peaceful coexistence with the Air Force was the wisest course. How's that for chemtrails? 1958. Also in 1958, Navy scientist creates clouds, breaks them up. Navy creation destroys clouds. Ordinary carbon black is used. Now, Dr. Florence Van Straten was interviewed for this, and she said, "We dropped carbon black suspended in a liquid over a track of a mile long and produced a solid line of clouds 1 mile long. When we dropped 1.5 pound dry packages of carbon black, we produced single clouds with each drop. The Navy team seeded 7 clouds with carbon and dissipated each of them in from 2.5 to 20 minutes. Each cloud turned gray and then rapidly disappeared. Aside from the cost of the airplanes, we spent less than $5 on the experiments in Georgia. Carbon black is used in printers, ink, and automobile tires, and is nothing more than soot." So this is from 1958, and the United States Navy was creating and destroying clouds using carbon black. 1974, weather modification by carbon dust absorption of solar energy, or how to use carbon black dust to steer a hurricane. Weather modification using carbon black, proposed by the U.S. Air Force Phillips Laboratory. In the paper, Weather Modification by Carbon Dust Absorption of Solar Energy, the one we just mentioned, they talked about solar heating of carbon dust could be deployed on a theater scale to achieve precipitation enhancement, to create cirrus clouds, and to dissipate fog and low clouds. Then everybody's favorite fun toy, owning the weather in 2025. But interestingly enough, in this think piece, as they put it, was this chart. And the chart says carbon black dust 2005 to be developed by the Department of Defense. Right there, CBD 2005 stands for carbon black dust. Technologies to be developed by DoD, has a star. This figure illustrates the system's development, timing, and sequence necessary to realize weather modification capability for the battle space by 2025. Now, if you thought owning the weather in 2025 was just a think piece, think again. Then came a joint Army Air Force meeting called Test Technology Symposium 97. Weather modification by Dr. Arnold Barnes Jr., wait for it, from the Phillips Lab, which was mentioned in the FOIA we just talked about. He says the use of carbon black to retard precipitation, fog dissipation, and cirrus enhancement. Carbon black, making cirrus clouds, stopping rain. You get the picture. From his presentation, 2 slides. Weather modification using carbon black. Increased precipitation. Muddy dirt roads to decrease tractability. Flood fields with small rivers. Decreased troop comfort level. Decreased tractability by snow or freezing rain when temperature conditions are right. Decrease precipitation. Dry out roads or fields for improved tractability. Deny fresh water to troops in semi-dry regions. Ooh, that's just nefarious. And the smoking gun, weather modification using carbon black, page 2. Increase cirrus cloud cover. Engineered design for airborne carbon black delivery system, completed 2004. This would line up with the Owning the Weather paper saying 2005. And the bottom of the notes is a very interesting statement. Build upon NOAA's Atmospheric Modification Program, AMP, a joint NOAA states effort written into NOAA's budget every year by Congress. And the Illinois State Water Survey studies on inadvertent weather modification. Illinois is one of the states that sued over chemtrail smoke pollution of the sky and have been studying them ever since. And then number 3, articles in the Journal of Weather Modification. Coming back to carbon black dust and that whole idea of steering hurricanes, 2008, the Hurricane Modification Workshop happened at the Department of Homeland Security. And at that Homeland Security meeting, you can see the link here, Hurricane Hacking, the Department of Homeland Security enters the weather modification business. Dr. Mosh Alamaro from MIT had a paper called On Hurricane Modification by Carbon Black Dispersion, Method, Risks, Mitigation, and Risk Communication. The presentation focused on the use of carbon black aerosol instead of dust, they call it CBA, to selectively heat parts of the atmosphere by dispersion of CBA above a hurricane. And you can see over here in this diagram, they show soot coming from a C-130, which is a U.S. Air Force plane, being dumped out of the back into a hurricane. Fleet of transport aircraft flying at 50,000 feet. Drop soot in the path of targeted areas of a hurricane. And you can see the soot cloud here. Soot is warmed by the sun, heating the cool air around it at the very top of the hurricane. This reduces the flow of air within the hurricane and it slows it down. Depending on where and when the soot is dropped, the now weakened hurricane will change course. Atmospheric Science, Seeing Through the Contrails by Olivier Boucher. He said, contrails formed by aircraft can evolve into cirrus clouds indistinguishable from those formed naturally. These spreading contrails may be causing more climate warming today than all the carbon dioxide emitted by aircraft since the start of aviation. That is a huge quote. So if these clouds are trapping more heat than all the CO2, then seriously, we have a problem.
It's not nice to fool Mother Nature.